Hello, welcome to today's product demonstration series. Now we're going to be looking at GFI LanGuard. And before we begin though, let's kind of go over some of the main features that we're going to cover. And also we want to get a good look at what GFI LanGuard is in general. So we're going to look at some of those main features and also kind of get an idea of what you would use GFI LanGuard for. Well, for one, GFI LanGuard provides patch management for Microsoft and Mac OS operating systems and other third-party applications over your network, things like Java or Adobe type products. It's also going to scan, identify security vulnerabilities, and recommends a course of action to solve a problem through either an automatic or a manual remediation process. It's also going to show detailed information about the hardware configuration of all those machines that are on that network. It'll provide vulnerability checks and a number of different things too, not just on those computers, but a number of network devices such as printers, routers, switches, other things like that that would be able to identify or respond to some of those requests that are pushed out by GFI LanGuard. It also contains a complete and thorough vulnerability assessment database. That's really going to help for things like standards that companies have to follow or compliance regulations like OVAL, SANS, HIPAA, SOX, PCI DSS, things like that. So that we have an understanding of what GFI LanGuard is or what it's going to help with. Let's kind of take a look at some of those features that we're going to cover today on our demonstration. First, we're going to look at the home page and the dashboard, look at the information that's provided there. We're going to look at the process of adding computers. Then we're going to look at managing and creating a scan profile, creating a scan schedule for that profile, the remediation process menu and the process behind that, and then finally we'll look at the reporting process. Again, first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the home page and dashboard. So what we'll do is we'll just kind of move over there real quick, and then we'll get an idea of how that process looks. The first section here is the GFI LanGuard home page. Now this page provides a lot of really good information right from the start. First of all, it gives you an idea of what the vulnerability level is based on the last scan of what your network using this little gauge here. It's also going to give you some quick shortcuts, like being able to go directly to the dashboard quickly and very efficiently remediate any security issues that have come up by just simply clicking on that button. It's going to bring you to your remediation process menu. You can manage the agents, which is going to go through looking at all of the machines that any agent had already been deployed on, which will cover those machines that we've been added, and we'll look at that too in a little bit. And then of course launching a manual scan, if you have to do that, you can also go through that manual scan process if you don't have a schedule already set up. Another nice piece about that is right under here, this bottom section that says latest news. So if you ever want to know what kind of products have recent patches that have come out and different products that we've added patch support for, here's a good place to see what kind of new added support for those third-party applications that we've added. First thing we're going to do is just going to go straight to the dashboard. There's a couple ways you can do that. You can do the top identifying tab here, and you're going to do a lot of your navigation from there if you're outside of this menu. Or you can just click on that View Dashboard button straight from that home page. Whenever you click on that, it's going to give you a very quick overview. In fact, it'll be under your overview section of all of the machines in the network that you've already included and identified. If you look over to the left, this is where it's going to give you a rundown of those machines. Now this group particularly on our demo environment here is broken down into network role, or what kind of role that each machine has in that network. So we have them separated out into servers, or any machines running server operating systems, and then workstations, or any machines running a Windows workstation-based operating system like Windows 7, Windows XP, Windows 8 in some places. And you have several different ways you can do that, several different ways you can do your grouping. That's just one particular way you've got it done on that demo. So additional information on that, you can break those down in several different ways. If you go into the group section, you can do it based on the network role, as we have it here. You can also do it by the operating system in particular. Or if you have several different domains within an organizational unit or multiple organizational units, you can do it based on those units as well. So you can have the separation of your machines, your workstations, your servers under their domain umbrella as opposed to just the entire network umbrella. Okay. After you have that classified, then you're ready to go. So what we're going to look at now is just based on that information, how our vulnerability schedules and on our sensors for the security vulnerabilities and patches, all that is going to be based on how we have our roles set up here. So right now we're looking at the entire network role, broken down into the 10 computers that we have on our demonstration, and it's going to show us various information like software updates, firewall issues if any have been identified, various other things too, like even malware protection, making sure that we have some type of antivirus or malware protection in place. If it's up to date, if the license is expired or the definitions are out of date, it can tell us that so that we can address that as well. If you see here, we also have, it breaks it down too, is if it passes a check, then it's going to obviously show up as green, and then of course if there's anything that needs to be addressed, it's going to show up as red and let you know that what category that's going to fall under. Under this particular section, we see that we've got some machines that have some vulnerabilities. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and drill into that. But before we do that, you notice some of the other information that you have. Some vulnerability trends, so we can see how things have progressed, and some of other different information that comes across that lets us know the metrics of our vulnerability assessments over time frames. And then, of course, some other useful information like the vulnerability distribution. How many machines is it set as low for or identified as low for? And then however many based on the color code, low, medium, high. What other machines have been identified over security vulnerability severity scale, if you want to call it that. And then, of course, on the right, it shows you how these things are broken down either by network role. If you click on the tab, servers and workstations in this case, since that's our filter or group, and then of course operating system too as well. At this point we're going to take a real brief pause, and then we're going to kind of look into some of the other things that we've talked about. We're going to look into the actual process of adding computers to that. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll go in through, and you'll notice down here on the bottom under your common tasks, even while we're on our dashboard, we can click on this little highlighted URL here called Add More Computers. So if we click on that, it's going to open up the Add Computer role. This Add Computer role, or wizard if you want to call it that, is going to help you to kind of walk you through the process of being able to add additional computers. Now there's a couple of different ways you can do that. You can add it by using a text file that you import, or you can add computers in a manual fashion where you can identify them individually over the network or scan them over the basic domain or organizational unit that would be in. If you add them on a manual basis, though, you can do that in several different ways. Again, you can use that text file import, or you can also specify by individual computer name or IP address. So once we've identified how we want to check for those new computers, in this case we're going to go ahead and do it based on doing a quick query against Active Directory for anything in our existing domain. So we'll go ahead and click on Add Computers from the Network, click on Next, and now it's going to go back, do a quick check against Active Directory over the domain that we've identified under our current local directory, and then it's going to go in and look for any computers that have been identified in there. Once that's done, if we check the entire domain, it's going to try and cover everything within the entire domain. or you can actually go in and explicitly specify individual machines that you want to add to that. Once that's been specified, you'll go in and it'll ask you to specify specific assignments if you have any. Like if you need to put in any kind of custom attributes or custom scripts, you can always add those in this section. Once those are done, you simply click Finish, and then your new computers are going to add up into your new section under here, how you have them grouped based on that role. Once those computers have been added, then of course they'll be showing up here, and then you can start going through the process of adding those computers to a profile, and then setting up schedules so that any remediation or any kind of scanning can happen for those new computers that you've added. What we'll do now is kind of shift gears a little bit and kind of look at actually managing and creating a scan profile. How do you go through that process? What do you do? Well, the first thing you want to do is you're going to go up here to your configuration section. Once you click on that, you're going to have several different things. The first thing that you're going to do is going to look to the left. Under your configuration section, this is where it's going to give you the ability to kind of segregate what you're wanting to focus on. Now, this is broken up into different tree details. Under the scanning profile section, it's going to give you 3 primary scan profile templates, or scanning profiles that are broken down into specific criteria. The first thing we want to do is, after we've gotten into our configuration menus and we're under the scanning profile subsection here, if you look down at the bottom, you're going to see under the common task, Go to Scanning Profiles Management. This is going to be the tool that's going to allow you to create profiles either right from scratch or based on any of those combinations or any of those profile categories that are preset for you. Once the profile scanning editor opens, this is where you're going to create your new profile. Over to the bottom left under Common Tasks in your new window, you'll see New Scanning Profile. What you'll do is simply click on that. You'll create a new profile name. You can also add a brief description, and then you can specify whether or not you want to copy the settings from an existing profile, some of those ones that we have canned for you, or if you leave the box unchecked, you can simply create your own profile from scratch. Typically, we're going to get you to try and use one of the canned profiles right from the start, unless you have very specific or very granular needs for the environment that you're going to be scanning and using GFI LanGuard with. But for the sake of the demo, we're going to just simply copy something and then go through the editing process that way. So what we'll do is we'll go through and we're going to copy all settings from the existing profile, and we're going to select our demo under this profile, which is GFI Dynamics, is our demo environment. So we're going to select that as our template. That's going to be what we're going to use to kind of get at least a general roadmap of how we're going to start setting up our new demo. You'll notice that after we've set up our demo, our new demo is going to show up on our profiles list. And I actually forgot my E on there, so I'm going to go ahead and change that real quick. So now our new demo profile, or our new profile that we've created, is available in our list. So what we'll do is making sure that that's highlighted. That's going to be the profile that we're going to edit. With that new profile selected, next thing we're going to do is over to the right. This is where you're going to start setting some of those profiles or some of that criteria for that profile to follow. Under the first tab, which is your vulnerabilities assessment options, you're going to have 2 primary categories, vulnerabilities and patches. Now, obviously, because this product, GFI LanGuard, has been designed to cover various different types of networks over vast amounts of different business verticals, from financial, healthcare, manufacturing, any kind of business you could possibly think of or relate to that might have to, that would be under susceptibility to anything that would need software updates, any kind of server maintenance, anybody that has anything that has to do with IT for that matter that needs to have some kind of maintenance and maintenance checks on their IT equipment or their intellectual property. This is going to do its best to cover anything and everything possible. But because of that, not everything one person needs is something that you need, which is why these profiles are going to be a real benefit and a real help to you, because you can scan for the things that are important to you and just ignore, forget about, or don't even scan for the things that aren't. So going based on that, we're going to group or enable our scanning for things that are relevant to us. And there's several different ways you can do that. So this little navigation tree to the left-hand side here under the editor is going to be your real friend to you. If you expand that down, it's going to give you a lot of different options on how to separate or how to identify things that are important to you. Now currently we have this set up under OS, Family, and Product. So if we want to do a vulnerability assessment, we can look at specific products. We can do vulnerability assessment based on anything that was Windows related. Well, if you notice, there's some other stuff in here too, things that may not pertain to you. If you're not a Unix shop or running any kind of Linux backend information, it's probably not important for you to check for that. So simply unchecking that box, you'll notice everything to the right all gets grayed out because we're not going to be checking for it anymore. Other thing too would be like Mac OS or anyone using Apple computers. If you don't have any in your business environment, it's probably not that important for you to check for things like that. So you can uncheck that box. Everything becomes grayed out because we're not checking for it. The ultimate goal of being able to do this is so that you can allow GFI LanGuard to run as efficiently as possible and as quickly as possible, because it's going to need to go out, investigate all of the machines in your network, and identify what it needs. So the less checks it has to perform, obviously, the more efficient it's going to perform that job. So that's one way that you can do that. Okay. Another way is you can go based on severity levels. So if we go down by product and severity, or product or severity type, let's look at product severity first. So if we break that down, we can go back under that same category. You'll see that again, your vulnerabilities. If we expand that out, now you have a lot more options here. This is going to go based on the product type. Well, if you're not running things like BitTorrent, or if you don't have any kind of BlackBerry installs in your environment, you can go based on this. See, the thing that you're going to notice is things become very granular with this. And the reason, again, being is because there's so many different applications out there in the world that some things may fit your environment better than others. If you're finding out where you get to a point like, well, you know what, I don't want to get that granular, there's a lot of things I just don't really care about, well, you can go through, again, taking your group by list and kind of separate things out just a little bit. In this sense, we're going to go back to severity and type, go under the same vulnerability, and now we can actually look at overall vulnerabilities that are based on severity detail. If it's undefined severity, well, maybe I do want some information about that. But things that are identified as low in severity, I don't particularly care about that. So I want to uncheck that. You'll notice, again, all of those checks become grayed out. Once that information is processed and you have things set up the way you want them, you can simply go under the next section. Now, in this section, under the patches, our second subcategory under vulnerabilities, you notice that we've unchecked undefined, low, and moderate. Those are things that, okay, there might be some things in there that may be useful information, but it's not something that I want to be woken up about. You know, IT admins across the world, if they get critical information or calls for critical issues over network at 2 o'clock in the morning, they really want to make sure that those are very critical. They want to make sure that they're giving up their sleep, they're giving it up for a reason. So all we did was we just specified the ones that actually would create an issue that we would be concerned about. Things like important things as far as the severity level goes, and critical also. So those are the things that we're going to be looking for. And then, of course, as you go along, there's going to be other things that you can get very granular with, like network and software auditing. So if you want to be able to check up against different ports that may be open in your software firewalls. Now, granted, a lot of companies use their external models, their hardware firewalls, to take care of this. So that may not be something that you may require within your local machines and so forth. If that's not something that you need to check for, simply uncheck the box, and you notice that all of the different port settings and port checks are going to be grayed out. Once you've identified everything is done, you like the way that your new profile is set up, or at least you have a good roadmap or good place to start. You don't have to worry about clicking any save or anything like that. All you would simply do is set it under the common tasks as active. Now if you notice, once we do that, you notice that little active flag will come up next to it, so we know that that's going to be the profile we're going to use for everything. Once that's done, no need to click any save or anything like that anywhere. Simply close the window, and our new profile is active. The next part that we're going to go through is creating a scan schedule. Now, creating a scan schedule is going to be really important, because being able to take that profile that we just created and then allowing GFI LanGuard to automate those processes so that we don't have to babysit it all the time. That's going to be really helpful for your IT staff, because they've got a lot of things that they need to be doing, things that are going to promote business and promote growth for your company, not just sitting and babysitting computers all the time. So the next thing we're going to do is go under our scanning profile section. Notice we're still under configuration, and then under the scanned or the scheduled scans subcategory there. Once we get in here, you'll notice there's a couple of different ways you can do this. Now, you can go under your common tasks like we've typically been using throughout our demonstration, or you can just go anywhere in the white and right-click, go to New, and then hit Schedule Scan. So there's a couple different ways you can do that. Just for the sake of the demo, we're going to stick to our pattern here. We're going to go under our common tasks, New Scheduled Scan. So we're going to click on that. It's going to open up our New Scheduled Scan wizard. This wizard is going to help us identify the particular computers we want the schedule to run against. That's going to be very useful, especially when you're talking about setting up different scans for different types of machines, or different scans for different groups of machines that have more or less priority. Things like workstations, you may want to be able to set it one schedule, whereas servers you may want to schedule under a different time frame depending on workload, business hours, different things like that. So right now we're going to be able to specify what range or what list of computers we want to scan against. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to scan a range of computers, and we're going to pull that in. So what we'll do is we'll select the way we want to collect. Now in this sense, because we've selected that, we can either specify a from and to subcategory for IP addresses, or if you go back, we can scan for a list of computers like we did earlier whenever we're collecting information from the network. Two different ways you can do that. You can either import that list from the text file. In fact, I'll kind of show you what that looks like. If we go back to that, we can look at several different things. So we can look at a list of computers. Now here we've got a list of computer names, just so you kind of get an idea of what the formatting would be. All it is it's a simple list of computers that has a simple text file that has names in it. You put in one computer, hit enter, go to the next line, put in the next name, go to the next line. Very simple. So there's no coding or anything like that you have to go through that process. Again, if you don't have that list, or you're talking about a large array of computers, simply going in and doing the import or do the select button, that's going to allow us to go back to that familiar screen that we looked at earlier, just by simply identifying any machines that have been identified in the domain. Then, of course, at that point, we can go in based on that category, and then just select the specific machines that we want this to apply to. So let's take those 4 computers, for instance. We're going to apply to those machines. Going to select OK. Now we've got a range of computers that we want that profile to be targeting. Click on Next. And the next screen is going to ask you, when do you want the schedule to occur? Now, you may particularly want these types of scans to go across after business hours, but you do want them often because there's so many different applications out there. Again, things like Java, Adobe, other third-party applications, Microsoft applications, service packs, updates, hotfixes. There's so many different things to try and keep up with that you don't want to have to babysit it all the time for those things. So you want to make sure that it happens pretty frequently, because no one particular vendor's schedule is going to match somebody else's. They kind of put out patches and updates as they see fit. So it's never going to match anybody's schedule in particular. Well, LanGuard is going to help you maintain your own schedule without having to follow theirs. First thing that you're going to do is you're going to set a recurrence pattern. How often do you want that scheduled scan to occur? You can do it by daily, weekly, monthly, and then of course get very granular in specifying if there's a particular day of the month, if you want it to occur on every first of. For instance, let's say we were following Microsoft's Patch Tuesday. Maybe we want to go through and specify, all right, I want my updates to go on the first Tuesday. In this sense, we're going to wait till Wednesday of every month. So we're going to go first Wednesday of every month. It's going to go and run that process. Or again, you can go back and specify other things like weekly or daily. So let's say you want the patch to run, or you want that schedule to run every Saturday. Well, you know people aren't going to be working that day, so it's not going to interfere with anybody's work environment. We also want to specify the time frame. So let's say we want this to occur at 6 o'clock. We want this to occur at 6 o'clock a.m. So it's going to kick off at 6 o'clock a.m. that day. Once we've specified the schedule we want it to follow, click Next. Then it's going to ask you what profile you want that to follow. Well, we just created a new one, so we're going to tell it to follow our new profile. Once that's done, you can either use the embedded attendant service account that would be used. Typically, that's going to be an account, even if it's a service account that's already in the domain administrator security group, or you can specify your own alternative credentials if you want to be able to use different credentials other than those. Select Yes, and then you have another option of power saving. So if you have computers in particular that may be offline, things like redundancies or disaster recovery servers or things like that that may go idle, you have the ability to tell LanGuard to wake the computer up if they have Wake on LAN capability. So it'll wake the computer up, deploy what it needs to do, run the scan based on the schedule, and then go ahead and let it shut it back down if you need to after the job's finished. If you don't have any particular machines in your environment that you need to follow any kind of Wake on LAN schedule for, simply just don't check any of the boxes and click Next. The next screen is going to give specifics on the auto remediation process. The auto remediation process is basically giving LanGuard permission to identify the updates and the patches and the fixes that it needs once it's verified those things from the machines that you put in your list, download what's needed, and then send those or automatically deploy those updates or patches or missing fixes down to those machines without you having to do it manually. And you can specify what particular types you want. If it's just a missing update, you can say, okay, yeah, go ahead and download and automatically deploy any missing updates. If you want to get more granular with that, you can also include things like missing service packs or update rollups. So let's say, for instance, an update had been patched, it's creating a compatibility issue, or there's a known issue based on the manufacturer, and they release a rollup or a hot fix for that patch, so to speak. You can actually tell that to include those rollups so that it can fix any kind of issues that may have come up over the last patch. You can also have LanGuard uninstall applications that have been deemed unauthorized. So if you have applications on machines, like for instance, if iTunes has been deployed on a machine that it didn't need to be on, you can specify that. You'd simply check that box that anything listed under unauthorized, I want LanGuard to automatically go in and uninstall it for me. That's kind of a nice way of helping your end users to realize that there might not be some applications that you want on your environment. Typically the second or third time that something gets automatically uninstalled, they're going to figure it out and they won't install it anymore. So that's kind of a nice warm way of saying, hey, that doesn't belong on your machine, and that being said, we're going to uninstall it. We're not going to ask you. So that's one way you can do that. Also, under this section, this is going to be really important for you guys that have to keep real critical and close attention to time frames. If you go under Configure Auto Remediation Options, If you click on that, it'll allow you to specify what happens before and after the deployment of those patches. You can either specify a message to be popped up in front of the user, especially if you're trying to do this during business hours for anything that would be critical. It'll pop up a message saying, hey, we're doing some maintenance on your machines, we're installing some updates and patches, just letting you know that we're doing this process, we wanted to make sure you're aware, and if an update occurs, you need to go ahead and save your work. On servers that are unattended, obviously you don't need to do that, so you would just simply uncheck that box. After the deployment, now this is where you can tell LanGuard what to do about reboot or shutdown requirements if any of those machines do require that. You can simply tell LanGuard not to do anything but to leave the computers alone. You can tell it to go ahead and reboot, but you want it to be done on your schedule, not on whatever a default action would be. Now you can have it do immediately after the deployment. That's fine, but let's say you're trying to do your deployment and you don't want things to occur after business hours or during work hours that may impact some of your users, or even during the week, so that even outside of business hours you want to make sure that those machines are still contactable by your users. So you want to be able to specify exactly when you want those reboots to occur. There's a couple of different ways you can do that. One, you can let the user decide. Again, if it's a workstation, you can have that message pop up saying, hey, we're doing some patches on your machines. Click OK. We'll go ahead and reboot your machine. So it gives them the option to specify whether or not they want. If we're talking about servers or you don't want to give them that option, simply either select the next occurrence of, which means it will hold off a reboot until it reaches a specific time during the day. So if it's just a hardline workstation, you know that people are going to be out of the office, you can specify that. Let's say I want the deployment to occur at 8 o'clock p.m. every day, or on the next occurrence of 8 o'clock after that deployment and download has been done. Or if you're not really sure when that's going to happen, you can specify a safe zone. So even if it's not that day, it can be within the next 24, 48-hour period, the next 2, 3 to 4 days. You can specify that it can go through that reboot process as long as it falls under a specific time frame. That way you can kind of keep it from happening or having something occur but then being carried over into those business hours. You want to be able to avoid that. So you can say, okay, that's fine. We'll go ahead and do the reboot as long as it's between the hours of 12 o'clock a.m., midnight, and 5 o'clock a.m. in the morning. So as long as it's in between those hours, go ahead and reboot, because I know that I won't have any of my remote users logged into that server at that time either. So it's a real good way of being able to gauge when exactly those things occur. Once you specify that information, you can close that out, hit next, and then from that point you can specify the report, how you want that report to be sent. Typically you can have the report sent to the administrator, it's directly to his emails. You can also have a hard copy or a PDF version of that saved over into a file, and that of course can be changed from the default. You can even override your general alerting options. So let's say the particular administrator that's the default contact and account for all this, you don't want that. You want anyone to follow this schedule. You want it to go to a different admin, somebody that would be on duty or on call or available during that same time slot. You can add an alternative or secondary email address or multiple email addresses to go out to someone else beyond that initial user. Otherwise, you simply leave that default, click next, and it's going to give you a quick review over all of the criteria you've specified. Here's all the information, here's the time frame, here's the occurrence, here's our auto remediation options, power options if we have any. Simply click finish, and you'll notice we've got a new scheduled scan or a new scan schedule that sets up, and it also shows you which profile it's going to be following, that new one that we just created. But you'll notice there's a little red X there. That means that the scan schedule is available, it's just not active. A couple of different ways you can do that. Simply right-click on that and enable it, or you'll notice that same icon is up here on the top. Just click on that to enable it, and now those machines are going to follow that new scan. Then you're ready for that automation process to save those IT guys some time. The next and final, one of the next things that we're going to look at now is going to be the remediation process. Now again, if you go straight to the home page, you can do that directly from your remediate security issues. That's going to be one of your second options. What it's going to do is just going to automatically take you to the remediation user interface. So there's two different ways you can do that. You can do that from the remediation tab at the top, or you can also do a remediation or remediate security issues from the link on the home page, and it's going to take you obviously to that same section. Under that section, you're going to see some common things. You're going to see some of the common tools that you use under the Remediation Center. Deploy software updates, uninstall software updates for those things or those times where you need to do rollbacks manually. You can do that. Deploy custom software. And in this section, you can actually specify an MSI or an EXE file for an application that you want automatically deployed over machines that may be missing those. That could be anything like an installer application for a basic application that you would use, or it could be something like a batch script where you're going to use that batch script to automatically deploy over machines. The secondary batch script may have additional attributes about it, like silent installs and various things like that, or predefined credentials. You can specify that batch script to be run, or again, you can use the executable or the MSI file. Simply add that, point it to the location where it's found. You can add additional custom flags if need be. And then, of course, if you're using any kind of map network drives, you want to make sure you use the UNC path and not a network drive path drive letter. We want to make sure that you use the UNC path there. But if you do have something, you would simply point to the file location. Once that's been identified, click Add, and your new application is going to show up on that custom deployment window. So that really helps in doing some mass deployments over large amounts of computers as well, without having to do all that sneakernet stuff and go to each machine. You can also do the uninstall of applications, which is, as we said before, you may have users that have applications that are periodically installed. Well, once you do your initial scan, LanGuard's going to be able to do a software audit to identify any of the software product sets installed over the machines on the network. If you find something that's been identified as something that you do not want installed on any of your machines, you would simply select that, and then you can do an uninstall. And again, that can be done either via that scan schedule, or this is going to be that manual process that's going to allow you to do it on the fly. So for instance, if we didn't want Microsoft Silverlight on any of the machines, if you expand that out, it's going to show you which machines that application is installed on. And then you can say, okay, on these it's fine, but this one it's not. It's going to create a problem. Simply highlight the machine that you want it removed from, and then down here on the bottom right, you're going to notice that that's no longer grayed out. You can simply click on Install, and it'll run that process for you. So you can, again, go through a lot of those processes without having to run out to the machine individually or do RDP sessions to them or anything like that. Just do everything right here from your console. In fact, we bring up RDP session, you can actually create and specify an RDP section, a session directly to those end machines if you need to do a manual remediation process, or if you need to change anything on that local machine to assist on that process. You can run through a remote desktop connection session right through that console, specifying the specific machine you want to get into, and then doing your connection. And then, of course, malware protection. If you want to make sure that there's anything there, making sure that the machines are identified. you can always go in through and make sure that any of the connection issues or the protection issues that that's supposed to be guarding from, making sure that the definitions or the patch updates for those softwares are done as well. Once the remediation job kicks off, what it's going to do is it's going to go open up a various list of jobs that are running. Here we've got a couple of jobs. One didn't complete for various different things. Either a patch was identified, but the download capability has been found to either been removed from the manufacturer, or it's not found, or incapable of being downloaded for various things. It'll give you specific information as to why. The other thing that you're going to see is you're going to see job details. So for instance, we'll go up to this job that completed. That's letting us know that it completed the details, it contacted the server for the patch, downloaded the patch, deployed the patch to the server, waited for the required actions to take place. You notice here is a quiet no restart flags have been added to this particular one. That way it can deploy the patch and it doesn't force a reboot. But you notice here that it does say that a reboot for this particular patch is required. So it lets you know that it completed, but in order for it to fully complete, the machine has to be rebooted. And essentially, if that has not been identified as something that happens automatically, it's going to wait for us to take that action manually or follow a separate schedule for that, depending on whether or not we added a time frame for that reboot or not. The last section we're going to look at is the reporting. Now again, as I mentioned, there's going to be a lot of information and a lot of different business verticals that LanGuard will cover. It's going to help with compliance issues, general network information and security vulnerability issues, patch up-to-dateness as far as any of the other applications. But for people that have to really comply to a lot of these complex requirements like PCI DSS for financial and fiduciary verticals, HIPAA for healthcare, also SOX for financial institutions. They have to be able to maintain a certain level of security protection, software up-to-dateness, amongst various other things that are required in order to maintain that compliance. Any company that works in those compliances know for a fact that if those things are not met, fines will follow shortly after. So this is a good way to be able to do a scan against your network, identify things that may be in particularly related to those particular environments or compliances that you have to follow, identify where your network has those weaknesses, and then use LanGuard to address some of these. So it's really going to be a very, very useful tool. Then, of course, for anybody else, the rest of us, we have various other things that we want to look at, like network security. We want to get a good idea of what that looks like. What our patching status has been. Has everything been patched? Has there any issues with any patching, anything like that? It's simply go under the patching that you want to get a report on, or simply just find that specific report under the criteria. Identify, making sure that that is this particular report that you want, and then, of course, generate that report. Now, once that report is generated, it's going to give you a brief synopsis of that report directly within the console. And then it's going to give you some options on what to do with it. You notice that we just ran our report, so we're getting some statistics come out on some of the information on our machines. So once that report has been generated, there's several different ways that we can get that report out, especially if we have to present this information for upper management, chief financial officers, as well as chief information officers that need to keep track of what's going on in their environment and network. You can export that out into various different formats. You can export it out into PDF, XLS spreadsheets, flat image files if you want something that's non-editable, RTF files, as well as some other things. Or you can also export that or email it out using that email address that's set up for your primary contact, typically your administrator's email address, in the same following formats: PDF, XLS, flat non-editable image files, so on and so forth. So let's say I want to export, I want an email, a copy of that in email in the PDF format. We see here that the email was generated and it was successfully sent to our administrator. That's going to wrap it up for the GFI LanGuard demo. I hope that this proves to be very beneficial for everyone. And always keep a lookout. We're always trying to keep this as up to date as possible and trying to give our customers and our partners the most information we can to make sure that you guys are familiar with all of our products. We want to make sure that you have a good idea on how everything is working there. So appreciate your time. Thanks so much, everyone. And again, if you do have any other questions, you're always more than welcome to reach out to us directly. You can do that various different ways. One of the easiest ways to do that would be reaching out to us directly from our website, www.gfi.com, or you can go to our website, contact information /contact us, same website, and then contact us either to our general GFI staff. We'll be more than happy to help you. And again, thanks so much for enjoying the presentation, and thanks for spending some time with us.